So please find a comfortable position. Let's sit for 30 minutes. One of the main things about posture in meditation is having the spine straight. So the Buddha usually says sit cross-legged with the body erect. And of course, the cross-legged part is not essential, but it is what they were doing, the most common way of sitting in India at that time, and maybe still today. And even if you're meditating lying down, it's useful to bend your knees a little so your spine is flat, straight, whether you're on your back or on your side. And it's good to know these things because there come times in life when lying down might be the only meditation posture we can use. Ajahn Pasano talked about having broken his pelvis, I think it was, or hip in Thailand, and it was lying down meditation for quite a while. And then the other important thing is to relax. I use my breathing as a support for relaxing. And breathing in, and when I exhale, letting go of tension in various parts of my body. I understand that taking deep breaths also helps to engage. I think it is the parasympathetic nervous system. It's a signal to the brain to relax. We want the body to be at ease. The Buddha talked about this. If the body can become tranquil, and that's supportive for the mind to become tranquil. And we store so much of our emotion in the body. It's so connected to the mind. And yet it's a coarser, sometimes easier aspect to pay attention to and to release. If you have difficulty with some tightness somewhere in the body, maybe your shoulder or your back, sometimes it helps to consciously tighten it up. clench the muscles in the area and then release. And of course, we want to bring our attention to our meditation object and invite the mind to let go of everything else. And to bring a sense of kindness to your body and to your mind. So that your whole system can feel at ease. And as we do that, we might feel a pleasant feeling arising in the body. And noticing pleasant feeling helps that feeling to expand. If we set down the past and the future, let it be off to the side for a while. No need to engage in anything now with the mind, except our meditation object and any pleasant feelings that arise in the body or the mind. pleasant feeling can come in the form of a lightness of heart, a bit of a relief from our ordinary activities. Can come from just that thought of kindness. Certainly, it can come from turning our attention inwards, being mindful and present. Can show up as tingling or warmth or fullness, especially if you're using the breath as an object, as the focus of your meditation. The breath is sometimes referred to as breath energy. Really invigorates the body, but it also carries the subtle energies through the body. Or it's so deeply connected to those energies that when the mind imagines spreading the breath through the body, it's really the energy that is being spread through the body. Anything arises in your mind to distract you, just see if it's possible to let it go. If it's something that's more persistent, then looking at the nature of that hindrance, that distraction might help. For many kinds of distractions, we can bring a sense of loving kindness, but also a firmness of intention to really give ourselves this time to be calm and quiet and focused. If it's a problem that needs to be solved, then invite it to rest on the side and promise to come back to it later. Let's see if that helps. With lots of kindness for the body and the mind, and encouragement to be happy and at ease. If there's a lack of energy, then bring an inspiring image into the mind, or consciously bring some energy to the base of your spine and encourage it upwards through the spine up to the top of your head. And just notice if that kind of imagery or intention changes things. Or if there's too much energy, bringing the attention to your abdomen and really grounding yourself. Noticing your feet or legs or buttocks touching the floor or chair, whatever you're sitting on, and really letting yourself become grounded and still, solid like the earth, contented. All right, welcome back, and welcome to those of you who came in after we started meditation. So today I thought I would just talk a little bit about the way the Buddha would talk to people, really introduce them to the Dhamma. So there are a few places in the suttas, at least 4 places, and 2 of them that you might want to look at are in the middle length discourses. I think I might share the screen here so you can see. I just pulled this out of the Bhikkhu Bodhi version translation. Or let's see, I think that's where I found it. It's often called a progressive instruction. The Buddha would give progressive instruction, and these 2 places where you find it in the middle length discourses are in Sutta number 58 and Sutta number 91. And in both cases, this is the instruction the Buddha gave to someone who is really a follower of a different group, who comes to him for one reason or another. In fact, this one, Upali, the householder, Upali was sent by his teacher to try to refute the Buddha and argue with him and win in debate. And it didn't happen that way. Upali was very impressed with what the Buddha had to say. And he actually said, I want to follow you as a disciple. And then it says the Buddha, the Blessed One, gave the householder Upali progressive instruction. And what follows from there is really something, as I said, that we see repeated in other places in the Pali Suttas. And I think it's interesting to think about what the Buddha might have said as he was giving this talk. So he starts by talking about giving. And of course, the Buddha talked about giving and generosity in many ways. And I really think that, and it's understood in the teachings of the Buddha and the Dhamma, that this is where we really start to develop by practicing generosity, giving. And I've talked a number of times with this group about Ajahn Ganha's talking about using everything that we do, thinking of everything that we do as a gift. I feel like this is an incredible method, beautiful way of living, and a beautiful way of seeing our work and what we do for other people, what we do for ourselves, that we can really have the attitude of mind, the attitude of heart, that everything we do is a gift. It really removes so much of the stress and pressure, and goes a counter to the ways of the world where we're supposed to be trying to get something, where it's considered to be really smart to get the most out of whatever it is that we're doing. And actually it works the other way around. When we're really giving, then we do receive the most. I remember one time when I was working in high tech, and I was doing some I was involved with some things at Stanford with a professor there in the computer science department. And he was kind of overloaded with projects, and I asked if there was some way that I could help. And he got me involved in this book project, and I wound up contributing to it in different ways. And it was like, it was my service, but it turned out to be so beneficial for me. It was just a really lovely example of how that happens for us. And of course, we can't do it with that in mind, or it isn't really giving. We don't want to taint it in any way. One time, a friend of mine invited me to go to hear the Dalai Lama speak in San Jose at the convention center. And the place was packed with people, thousands of people were there. And one of the things he said is that if he had any idea of getting something out of this, it would ruin it. You know, to really be there to give to everyone there was the attitude that would make it most beneficial for everyone. So not even a thought of what we get out of it. So this is very different from the culture we live in general, as I said. And I'm looking forward to hearing what other people have to say about these different things. But this is how the Buddha would start off, helping a person reorient their mind to be available to take in the Dhamma. And when he would move from talking about giving to talking about virtue or morality. And I imagine he would definitely talk about the 5 steps. You know, avoiding taking life of any living creature, avoiding taking anything that's not meant for us. So no killing, no stealing, avoiding sexual misconduct, never using sexual energy in a way that harms either ourselves or someone else. A speech that is true. Oftentimes in the suttas, speech that is true and pleasant to hear. Of course, sometimes it's important to say some things that are not pleasant to hear, that someone won't want to hear, but is really for a good purpose, really done with a heart of loving kindness. And then it can be very beneficial. And the 5 precepts includes, as most of you know, avoiding drugs or alcohol, anything, substances that would cause us to lose our carefulness, our mindfulness. And so I'm sure he talked about those things with regard to virtue, especially for someone who's new to his teachings. He might not have gone any further than that. But we find as we practice that virtue goes deeper into real purity of mind, really subduing sensual desire, subduing ill will or anger. But I think he gets to some of that a little bit later, even in this first Dhamma talk given to somebody. And then he talks about heaven, talk on the heavens. This is probably one that some of us aren't so familiar with, and there's some indication of what the Buddha might talk about other places in the suttas. He told us, he encourages using the thoughts about devas, which are so very probably the same thing as angels and heavenly beings that are born into a heaven realm, thinking about their good qualities. What does it take to be an angel? What does it take to be a deva? and recognizing that we have those qualities too, or the way in which we have those qualities. And of course, then if there are some ways in which our way of acting, speaking, or thinking doesn't fit in with that, we have an opportunity to refine that. So I think he may have been talking to these people in that way. It's also possible that he was talking to people who have a strong, interest in the heavens, because being reborn in the heaven realm isn't the goal in Buddhism. It's complete peace and stillness, freedom from all suffering. This idea that there is suffering in the heaven realms is something that we can easily pick up on even in other traditions. And yet there's kind of an ongoing kind of a wish to see it as perfect in the heaven realms. The Buddha said, no, life is a lot longer in the heaven realms, but still pass away. There's still dukkha, suffering. So once he finishes with that, then he talks about the danger, degradation, and defilement in sensual pleasures, and the blessing of renunciation. So in a nutshell, that's anything that we want to see, hear, taste, touch, smell, that we're, longing for, wanting, that we get for ourselves, and then noticing how short-lived the pleasure is from those things, and how then we just want more, something else, something different, and there's no end to it. And you can really see this with, how people strive to have more money, for example. I mean, the Buddha never had any kind of negativity about people making a good living. There's no problem with that. As long as we do it in wholesome ways without harm, that's totally fine. And he gives advice about how to use our wealth in ways that are beneficial to ourselves, to our family, to our friends, to the world, to rejuvenation of whatever livelihood we have, those kinds of things, to give, charitably, all of those things. But what he's talking about here is the danger in wanting constant comfort, wanting constant stimulation, wanting some kind of sensual experience, and how that never really is fulfilling. That what we're really craving, what we're really desiring, can't be satisfied through the sense world. And that if we practice putting a stop in place, holding back, seeking that comfort, pleasure through other means, through meditation, through kindness, through generosity, through, really developing good relationships. If we do the things that actually help us develop our character, that we are much happier, more satisfied, and we don't go down the road of addiction. Whether that's an addiction to something that's socially acceptable or not, it's still a life of dissatisfaction. So he had a lot of ways of talking about this, the dangers in it, the dangers in living a life that's just competing for something that's actually so impermanent and unsatisfying, and becoming basically getting beat up in a way by pursuing those things. So that would be part of that part of his talk, I'm sure. And then it always says in these cases that when the Buddha knew that the person's mind was ready, was receptive, the desires and aversions, doubt, restlessness, worry, dullness, those all gone. The person is really inspired, elated, and confident in the Buddha. Then he would tell them about the Four Noble Truths. I think it's pretty interesting that it takes that much to get people prepared for something that we think of as kind of the basics of Buddhism. Then he talks about how to work with suffering, how to work with dissatisfaction, with uncertainty, with the constant change that we experience in this world, and how to see the root cause of why it's so hard and painful, and how we can experience the relief from that. And the path that we have to practice with in order for that kind of relief to become more the case in our experience, and to be really free, ultimately free from suffering. And then here is quite a dramatic ending. The person takes it fully in and he sees the Dhamma for himself. So this is a stream entry experience. And he becomes, as it says, independent of others in the teachings. And what that means is there's that insight, that very profound insight comes in, and the person actually has a really solid understanding of the way things are, of Dhamma. They don't have any doubt anymore about how things work. It seems a little magically quick, but clearly this person had quite a bit of preparation before ever coming to the Buddha in certain ways. And then, of course, to hear this all spoken by the Buddha and being in the Buddha's kind of energy, if you will, must have been incredible, an incredibly supportive force. So having said all that, I'm very interested in your comments and questions, because that's really how I think the Dhamma comes alive. The wonderful questions you ask or experiences that you share. Any thoughts? Yes, Danny?
Sensual pleasures. So, like having a really nice meal, or I'm just looking out the window of these beautiful trees, and later I'll go for a walk and try to take in the sensual pleasures of the smells. I'm just wondering what's the line between when I, I guess I'm answering my own question, and that is when you crave more.
Mm.
If it leads to craving more, then maybe uh, maybe I shouldn't be doing this.
Mm. Well, I think it's a really important area of exploration, and it's an important thing for each of us to experience, I think, because we do see in the suttas, especially if we look at like the verses by the Arahant monks, they're so into nature. The toughest renunciant monk, Mahakassapa, he's like, I love this mountain. I love this mountain, over and over. This place where he lived. And it's like to recognize that being in nature can be uplifting, inspiring, calming. But you're exactly right. It's like, when is it I want this thing, and it's a real craving. It's not something that's just, like we're happy about it. It brings pleasant feeling. Like we have so the birds have been so happy with this rain, and it's just wonderful to kind of listen to them and see them around. But we have, especially Ayachitananda, she has this habit of saying, but I'm not coming back for that. Whatever it is, I'm not coming back for that. You see a beautiful tree in bloom, but I'm not coming back for that. It's great, but that idea. And I think the places where we really need to look at what we hold as crucial to our well-being from sensual pleasures, because it's when we want to fight for something that we think is essential to our comfort, or the kinds of things. I mean, the Buddha talked about sensual pleasures being the root of everything from quarrels between family members to out and out wars. It's not just seeing natural beauty or experiencing the nice feelings of being with good friends or something like that. It's more than that. It's wanting power, wanting prestige, wanting money, wanting, the kinds of things that actually are driving human beings to being incredibly mean, unethical, heartless. So yeah, for us, maybe it's something much more subtle or innocent, but it's still worth noticing, like what am I drawn to so strongly that would cause me to get reborn in this realm.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. Neil?
Yeah, so I was struck by the way you put it, that, and the way it is in the sutta, that these the first things that he teaches are generosity. It's not in front of me now, but and I thought, there's something really profound about that a lot of people who come to Buddhism nowadays, I think because the teachings are so readily available, I'm not sure how to say this. I think the Four Noble Truths can be very abstract to people. Or even some people may say, well, yeah, so, yeah, I know they're suffering, And so sometimes I think a lot of us have come through this path in very convoluted ways that may not have been helpful to us for understanding, for really being ready to understand the deeper teachings. And, it strikes me that this sutta should be like a primary text for teachers, you know, to sort of focus on those true basic things first, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
It just had never occurred to me, you know, that that way of doing things would have ever been laid out that way by the Buddha.
Mhm.
And it's just makes a lot of sense. There's, you know, I don't know. I'm just commenting on my being sort of surprised by it, as well as being really impressed by it, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the Buddha was so brilliant, and he really understood human beings. He really understood the nature of reality, and he offered the teachings in a way that people could take them in, and it's still working. It's amazing. So yeah, the whole idea of giving, what that does to the heart, how that changes our orientation to our experience in life. It's profound and it's beautiful. And it's true that in the West, it's been talked about a lot that, you know, people wanted the meditation. And in some ways, we want the sensual pleasure of the meditation, you know, before we understand the profundity of it and how it's really going to set your life upside down, you know, if you go for it, because, you know, we start to see ourselves and what we will need to change. And so, yeah, it's pretty amazing. And yeah, it's so easy to be grateful to the Buddha for his incredible offering to the world. Yeah, thank you, Neil. Grace has her hand up, and I'm gonna go to Steve first, and then we'll hear from Grace. I saw Steve's hand go up earlier too in the physical way, but now he's got the electronic hand too. So go ahead, Steve.
Yeah. Well,
it's a little bit hard to hear you. Can you get closer to the microphone?
Yeah, let me get closer. So
Okay.
I'm on the maintenance committee of our co-housing here, and we often start our meetings just starting in on the arguments on the different things that have to get done and things like that. We had a little retreat last week, and then we agreed to change some of our meetings. And one thing we're going to do now, and we did this week, was to start with a review of a set of ground rules. And I was just thinking how that's kind of what the Buddha did here. And what's in the ground rules are a lot of things that are right speech, you know, speak for yourself, don't, you know, and assuming good intentions. So it's kind of a recognition of the generosity of the volunteers there. And so I was just struck by the correlation between the ground rules that we had in this kind of secular. We don't, nothing on the heavens though.
Not the heavenly co-housing environment. It's kind of heavenly. Yeah. Thank you. Did you want to say more? You're muted.
No, that was all.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Okay, so Grace and then Ariane.
Hope everyone can hear me if I just talk over here.
How about if
Oh, sure.
maybe we'll just do that.
Sure. I was struck by something Neil had said, and I was also struck by how the Buddha began by talking about these other things that aren't the Four Noble Truths, because I always thought it was just the Four Noble Truths from the very beginning. And I was thinking about how even from a sort of skeptical doubt intellectual mindset approach at it. It's like it makes sense because it correlates to what other religions teach in the beginning as well. Like many religions talk about generosity and the importance of giving, and how the world works kind of that way with karma, and virtue, strong virtues and values, and that just even that you can kind of see across all these just like best ways to live life. So starting from that perspective, it makes sense that the Buddha would talk about that first, because that's a very like easy to comprehend sort of teaching. And then moving into like heavens for hope for the future, and those kinds of concepts. And I just kind of, I really like from all aspects of how the Buddha talked about that in the beginning. It's really nice to hear. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Grace.
Thanks.
And I don't know how other people's experience has been in that regard, but if we look again at that list, you're looking at giving, then virtue, then the heavens, and that's kind of where my previous religious instruction ended. They didn't want to get into, well, that's not true entirely, right? We know about ascetic practices in various religions, but it was not really for the normal people so much. But the stories have always been inspiring to me of saints and the ascetic Jews, and different groups that practice some level of renunciation. And yet I think it's so valuable to see that it's important for us to do that as lay people in ordinary life. It makes our ordinary kind of lay, if you want to call that ordinary life, to be so much more meaningful and free from trouble, really, and freeing the mind. So yeah, I really thank you for that perspective, Grace. Marianne?
I was actually going to say something similar to what Grace said about how I think it's interesting how so many Buddhists teach the Four Noble Truths as a sort of beginner introductory level teaching, but suttas like that, and I know that that particular passage is copied elsewhere in the canon, really make it sound like you're supposed to sort of prime your mind for it in advance, that it's not really the starting point. And I think one reason, like, I've sort of been going into like sort of more of this Advaita Vedanta non-duality teachings is they're very good at getting you directly to just that sort of pure mind state, that sort of mind free of the hindrance state, and cutting right to that. As sort of and for them that's like the final thing. But from looking at passages like this, that's just sort of the preliminary thing that launches you to the stuff that's actually unique to the Buddhist teaching. So I'm wondering if that might be, I don't know what impact that's going to have on, like, people as practitioners, if a lot of people are starting with the sort of putting the cart before the horse sometimes when they sort of try to get into overly deep Dhamma talks before they even have a mind that's ready for it. I don't know, I'm just speculating.
Sometimes we get questions from people about things that clearly are confusing because the mind isn't ready for it, or it's not so much, it's like the mind, but the experience, we just haven't had enough of a chance. People haven't had enough of a chance to really experience those aspects that are so important to really develop the heart. And if we try too much to do it intellectually, it can get very confusing, and the progress is limited. So it's this direct experience thing that's important, like the direct experience of moving away from swatting flies or mosquitoes and killing animals for other reasons. Like what happens to the heart? There's a change. What happens when we change our attitude about, our work, and it's held as a gift that we're giving. We see the changes, the purification of the mind. We're so much less likely to complain about things or to blame people for things that, are just part of a human experience. We all make mistakes. Anyone can be overcome by greed, hatred, or delusion, and when we start to appreciate these things and through our experience, recognize that we can have a lot more tolerance and a deeper understanding of how we can be kind to others, respectful of others. I think all of these things are woven into virtue. So yeah, it's what's great is if people start with, they want to meditate, and then eventually they show up and start reading the suttas and getting really like a more broad thing. Even if the cart came before the horse, if you go back and get the horse, it's probably going to work out. Yeah, thank you, Ariane. Lisa?
Okay, I just want to give the other perspective. It's a little puzzling to me. Maybe there are just different ways of getting into the spiritual path, and this is one that that makes sense, starting with gratitude and virtue and the joys of the higher joys of renunciation. But maybe it depends on your family upbringing and if you see the real benefit, like you were saying, direct experience, if you see the benefit of giving and other virtues in action around you, that would make an impact. But for me, I heard of those things and I agreed in principle, but I don't think I would have really gotten on the Buddhist path without a direct experience of the impact of suffering on myself and others, and realizing that it was something that wasn't just a puzzle to solve or to compete with others to get rid of, but built into our existence. So.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. It's a good point. I think this is what the teachers coming from Asia, like Ajahn Chah, were really pointing out. Even if people want meditation before they learn these other things, give them something that helps them get involved and then fill in the rest. And it's true, to be able to have that glimpse that there's a way out of suffering. That is such an important thing to take in. Steve wrote the wrong number is on the document, which is certainly possible. So it could be Sutta 56 instead of 58. You'll find it. It's in the neighborhood. Thank you, Steve, for putting that in the chat. And thank you, Lisa, for that perspective. I mean, the Buddha did it this way with those people in front of him. And, I think that's one of the important things about learning how to help people is we have to look at, to the degree we can. He was a master at it, but, what is it that what's going to help them be inspired to basically change their lives. Yeah, thank you. Neil?
Yeah, listening to everyone I'm sort of thinking, I'm sort of backpedaling now on what I said earlier. I mean, I think it's definitely true that, we all come from different backgrounds and perspectives. And, I mean, that's something I've been aware of for a while, that the Buddha taught differently to different people based on what he understood they were ready to hear. And I started just now thinking about what the first thing I ever read that got me hooked on Buddhism was had to do with suffering. And it was one of the books by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche in the Tibetan tradition. And the way I remember it, and of course, somehow in all of my moves, I managed to somehow foolishly get rid of his book, so I have to go back and see if I'm remembering it correctly. But the phrase that struck me was that there is a tender heart of sadness that we all share. And that was the sort of the bullet that went through me. And I mean, that I still think of that phrase as my understanding of what dukkha is. And so, yeah, I mean, that's what brought me into the practice. So yeah, there are many ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, part of my reason for talking about this progressive instruction today was on the theme of going back to the basics. So this is something that our teachers that we've looked to have been saying lately. Ajahn Pasano says it pretty regularly. Go back to the basics. And not to us exactly, but to people in general. And I think when we see this way that the Buddha gave progressive instruction, we can also remind ourselves that there may be things that we can pick up from talking about giving, virtue, heavens, etc., and really kind of fill in whatever might be helpful into our own practice and the way we are conducting our life. Especially if we're at a point where we're maybe a little stalled in our practice, or we aren't quite sure about something, there's some doubt, then we can go back to the basics and see if there's a way to bring that more together. So we have a few minutes. Does anybody have a question about anything else? We could take one question, I think. No, everybody feels so content. Yay. Okay, so I think we could probably end the recording and